I did go to church with Bobby. You guys are really getting someone, and I know you guys kind of understand who you get, but Bobby's a mentor to me. He's been my Sunday school teacher now for a couple of years, and you guys are really getting somebody special. So I'm excited about what is in store for him. I'm excited about what's in store for you guys, and also what's in store for the church today. So I feel like this was kind of a good message, kind of going into the new year. And I know everyone sees the scripture in here. It says 1 Samuel 17, 1 through 50. We're not doing 1 through 50. All right, everyone's like, wow, that's a whole thing. So 1 Samuel 17, the story of David and Goliath, of course. Everyone's heard it, faith over fear, facing giants, however perspective you want to take at it. But 1 Samuel 17, the entire story is 1 through 50, which is kind of, we're picking and choosing, taking a few verses from that, and they may be on the screen throughout here. So to kind of start with, I heard a pastor tell a story a few years ago, actually, and kind of relates to this. So he knew someone that was kind of hurting. All right, he was hurting all over his body. He had to eventually go to the doctor. He's like, you know what? Talking to the doctor, he's like, Doc, I'm hurting everywhere. Every part of my body is hurting. Well, the doctor said, okay, cool. So take your finger, touch your forehead. So he touched his forehead. It hurts. And then the doctor said, okay, interesting, nice. All right, so now take your finger, touch your elbow. Oh, it couldn't really do it any more than that. All right, it pained, it hurt. He's like, all right, interesting. He's like, all right, so hey, take your finger, touch your knee. He touched his knee. Hurting really bad. By this time, it was kind of excruciating. Well, the doctor held his hand up and said, you dummy, you have a dislocated finger. You have a dislocated finger, right? Yeah. So, in our walk, giants may seem large, but they can be something really small, right? Really small that can affect our life, can affect how we think. So when we read about David and Goliath, our perspective can change. It's not always the giant, 9-foot thing that's standing in front of us, essentially, okay? So when we look at it, what's the anatomy of a giant? So it's one thing that can ruin our entire life, all right? It can be big or small. In this situation, it was a dislocated finger, all right? It wasn't that he had pain all over his body. It was his finger that was causing him the issue. Then you have something that can loom large, a situation, a circumstance, pain or a problem, something that seems, that may take your breath away, it kind of makes you panic. The one thing that's overwhelming in your life, okay, it can be, like I said, something really big, something really small, but it's something that matters to you, all right? So we all face giants in our lives. And what are some in your lives? Everyone in here has something that they're dealing with right now, a struggle, financial. You have health, depression, addiction, sickness, and also fears. A lot of people have fear of everything. Whether it's small or significant, it's a fear to you, right? So that's essentially the anatomy of a giant. That's the perspective we're looking at today, okay? So the devil uses this to intimidate, to paralyze, and convince us that we can't win, all right? All he has to do is whisper, you're not good enough. That's all he has to do. So you understand, and this kind of goes off into another verse, but you do understand in the garden, when Adam and Eve were in the garden, when the devil spoke to Eve, do you understand that the devil didn't teach her to steal? He didn't teach her to murder. He didn't teach her to do anything else. All he did was tell her to get her to doubt what God said, right? That's all he did. That's how sin entered the world. So that's one of the biggest things that we have to deal with as Christians is, are you good enough? Is that really what God said? Is this really what you need to do? So, yeah. Anyway, all right, let's bow and pray. Dear God, thank you for today. Thank you for this Sunday. Thank you for this church. Thank you for this opportunity. Lord, I just pray that as we go through this, that you would place me behind the cross. Lord, I pray that they would see you and not me. Lord, I pray that you would speak through me, use me as a vessel. Lord, thank you again for everyone that's here. Everyone's here for a reason. Lord, I pray as we close this year out and begin a new year, that you would take control. And thank you for the blessings that you've given us, that you will give us. And thank you for protection. In your name, amen. All right, so giants appear bigger than they are, right? So we'll start 1 Samuel 17, 4 through 11 is where we're at here. So, verse 4 through 7 in chapter 17. Then Goliath, the Philistine champion from Gath, came out of the Philistine ranks to face the forces of Israel. The Bible says he was over 9 feet tall. He wore a bronze helmet, and his bronze coat of mail weighed 125 pounds. He also wore bronze leg armor, and he carried a bronze javelin on his shoulder. The shaft of his spear was heavy and thick as the weaver's beam, tipped with an iron spearhead that weighed 15 pounds. So just the tip of the spear was 15 pounds, not the entire thing. His armor bearer walked ahead of him carrying a shield. So this guy was so validated, he had a guy that carried his shield for him. All right? So this is pretty intimidating. All right? So there used to be an old radio show that would prank call people all the time. It was funny. He would call them on the phone and he would say, "How big a boy are you?" And it would really set people off. Goliath in this situation was pretty big. All right? So he's already wearing a bunch of stuff, you know, and it puts it in perspective. He's over 9 feet tall. All right? He had his own guy that took the shield for him. And his armor coat, just a little thing that he wore above to protect his upper body, was over 100 pounds. All right? The significance. So when we look a little bit further, when David shows up to the scene, if you look in 1740, when David's actually preparing for all this, you go down to verse 1740. So when David picked up 5 smooth stones from a stream and put them into a shepherd's bag. So then, armed only with the shepherd's staff and slings, they started across the valley to fight the Philistine. So does anybody know the significance of the 5 stones when David was facing Goliath? If David's only going to face one giant, why did he get 5 stones? Because Goliath had 5 brothers. Or 4 brothers, sorry. So what's that say? So when God's preparing you for a fight, we don't take just enough to get by, right? We prepare for the battle. We don't just prepare for the fight. So, looking back at David, not only did David have enough faith to say he's going to defeat one, David had enough faith to say he's going to defeat them all. All right? Through God. So, when we face our obstacles and stuff, we prepare for the entire battle, not just the individual fight. All right? So, Goliath was armored, all right, as the Bible tells us. He was experienced, and he was very intimidating. So he'd been looping over Israel for 40 days. We see that a lot in the Bible, 40 days. And there's actually a movement that I kind of follow. It's called Day 41. If you look at it, it's on the 41st day, a lot of things were overcame. But for 40 days, every morning, this giant, this warrior that had been training since his youth, would come out and taunt the Israelites. An entire army. Every morning, Goliath would get up and go out and taunt him. Like I said, this happened for 40 days. All right? So, again, like verse 33 says, he'd been a man of war since his youth. All right? So he'd been training for war his entire life. So, how do we apply this? Let's break it down and get into it a little bit. So, giants look big. Why? Because we tend to compare them to ourselves instead of comparing them to God. All right? So we take what we're facing and we look at it from perspective of how am I going to overcome it. All right? So that's where you need to shift your focus on God. Okay? So instead of comparing our issues, our fears, our dealings with ourselves, we need to compare them to God. Okay? And so what's your giant in your life at the moment? Is it looming? Is it overwhelming? Is it maybe scary? I kind of want you to think on that. If you have something that's going on in your life now, and I know everyone that's human has some kind of anxiety or some kind of fear, or something may not, fear the unknown. But this is what I want you to understand. If you don't write anything else down today, this is one thing I want you to write down and take away. I know I don't do notes like some people do. Need to get better at that. But I will say, write this down. This is the one thing I want you to take away from this. Fear will magnify your problem, but faith magnifies the Lord. Okay? So if you fear something, it tends to magnify, the problem. magnifies the Lord. Okay? So fear magnifies problems, faith magnifies the Lord. So, and again, faith sees what fear cannot. All right? We're moving on to the first sample, still here, verse 26, 32. And I know everyone in the room is very familiar with Billy Graham. All right? I'm not related to him. But that's the first thing everybody says. Maybe down the line somewhere, but not that I know of. So, Billy Graham, at one of his crusades, told a famous story about, you can't see the wind, but you can see the effects of the wind, right? All right. So a lot of people tend to forget that. We see the effects, like tomorrow may be a windy day. You're going to see the effects of wind all day, but can you put your finger on the wind? No, you can't. The same thing applies in faith. All right. It's something that you can't see. It's something that we, have faith in, essentially. And we can flip over to Hebrews 11. I love the book of Hebrews. And it's just a couple verses out of here. You don't have to if you don't want to. But in Hebrews we have so many things that happened that were by faith. And the main verse I'm taking out of this is in Hebrews 11:17, when it speaks about Abraham offered Isaac as a sacrifice to God. So I'm a parent, and I'm sure there's other people in the room that are parents. Does everyone, have you actually sat and meditated on that? The fact that God asked Abraham to offer his son Isaac as a sacrifice. Has anyone ever really considered that, really thought of that? And the amount of faith it took for Abraham to do that. I mean, he built an altar. I mean, I don't know the time frame that happened, but the entire time he's built an offering, or an altar, and he knew what he was going to have to do. All right. But in Hebrews 11, several verses, and I didn't put these up here, but I just wanted to kind of drive a point home. You have verse 3, by faith. Verse 5, it was by faith. Verse 7, it was by faith. Verse 8, it was by faith. Verse 11, it was by faith. And then, of course, 17, it was by faith. And, of course, you go on to verse 20, 22, 23, 24, 29, 30, 31, and 33. All begin by, it was by faith. All right? So, and these are all dealing with some of the stories that, you hear throughout the Bible. It was by faith that things happened. And in this situation, the same thing applies with David. All right? It was by faith that this happened. So, that whole book talks about people who had faith despite of oppressions, disagreements, what society said, and personal comfort. They relied on their faith in God to provide. The one stands out, like I said, was 11:17, because me as a parent, I can relate to that situation. I don't even really want to relate to it. But it was by faith that things happened. Saul offered, and we go back to 1 Samuel. So, even Saul kind of knew what was going on with this. When David's like, hey, I'll go fight him. Even Saul was like, man, I don't think it's a good idea. And so in that situation, Saul offered his armor to David. Of course, David put it on. He's like, no, I really doesn't feel comfortable. I don't think I'm going to use it. And then, which I go into here, and I know 1 Timothy is what I put up here, kind of speaking to more young people. It includes younger Christians. But 1 Timothy 4:12, because David, like I said, David was a young shepherd boy. That's all he's really known for. But let no one despise you for your youth, but set the believers an example in speech, conduct, love, and purity. All right, so don't let anyone discourage you, whether you're new as a Christian or you're actually young. All right, so don't let anyone discourage you as far as that's concerned. So even in verse 28, and I put this up here, but David's older brother even tried to put David in his place. All right, so what's that essentially saying? So do we ever find any kind of conflict or any kind of abrasiveness or tension when we try to move forward into something? And the funny thing about it is it's typically not from our friends that really don't believe. It's typically about other Christians, right? Like other Christians could be really abrasive, really hurtful. can try to tear you down because they may think it's better, that they have a better view than anything else. But if you notice, even the army in verses 24 and 25, when you dig into it, even the army doubted what was going to happen. So we had as soon as the Israelites saw him, they began to run away in fright. Have you seen the giant? The men asked. He comes out each day to defy Israel. The king has offered a huge reward to anyone who kills him, and he will give that man one of his daughters for a wife, and the man's entire family will be exempted from paying taxes. All right, so the Israelites were scared to death of Goliath. So what's that tell you about this? All right. The army that was around David ran in fear when they saw Goliath. They saw a monster. They saw a guaranteed defeat. They saw Goliath's strength, and they saw he was too big to fight. This is where it changes. David saw Goliath was too big to miss. All right. So standing behind God, standing on faith, he knew God had promised victory. All right. So even when everyone else is against you and want to push you in other directions, or say, hey, it's not a good idea, to try to instill that fear in you, you have to stay God-focused on it. You have to understand that faith, God's bigger than the problem. And in this situation, David echoed fear. He did not echo fear, he echoed faith in the situation. All right? So, with us, so think of any battle that you may be in or you may be facing. Are you complaining about the circumstances, or are you echoing faith? So are you kind of dwelling in, your own, self-pity and just kind of dragging and, trudging and kind of lumping along, or are you echoing faith, what God's promised? All right? Because how that applies and how that's extremely important is people that are watching you. All right? Like, how do you echo faith to people who don't know you, who may know you in a situation? So we flip down into verses 45 through 47, which I think I put that up here. Anyway, so what did David do before he flung the stone? So verses 45 through 47 tell us. So he spoke victory. All right. So verse 45, 47. They replied to the Philistine, "You come to me with a sword, spear, and javelin, but I come to you in the name of the Lord, of the heaven's armies, the God of armies, of Israel, whom you have defied. Today the Lord will conquer you, and I will kill you, cut off your head, and then I will give the dead bodies of your men to the birds and wild animals, and the whole world will know that there is a God in Israel. And everyone assembled there will know that the Lord rescues his people, but not with sword and spear. This is the Lord's battle, and he will give you to us." So let's everyone associate, even in 2025, right? David and Goliath. So he's pretty right about that. It's following time. But, so David understood it wasn't just God's people, but God himself, the Philistine army, was challenging, right? So he knew that it just wasn't the people of Israel, that he was actually, they were challenging God, all right? It was an issue. They were playing with fire, essentially. But when we get into the takeaways from the day, so just understand you have a calling from God that's bigger than any giant in your life, right? So pick up your stone, step forward, and remember giants fall when God fights with you. And of course, we have to put in perspective, out of all this, faith does not deny the giant's size. However, faith does declare God is bigger. Okay? And I'll say it again. Faith doesn't say that the giant is not big or looming. However, it does declare that God is bigger. All right? You just may be the only one in the room with faith, like I was saying before. And that's enough. David didn't just win a personal battle. He sparked courage in an entire nation. Your victory over your giant isn't just about you. is for those watching your faith, too. All right? We are a direct representation of, our faith and our walk. So we all know the story of David and how great he became, how great his lineage was, even though he still faced some issues later in the history, as we all know studying him. And he knows the plans for this church, and this is the thing to kind of get on. I think you guys have endured long enough maybe without a pastor. All right, and the fact that's really exciting, and I know I'm not here, but the fact that's really exciting is you guys are going to have a pastor next Sunday. That's awesome. And not only just any pastor, like I'm telling you, Bobby is awesome, and I'm really excited for him. I'm excited for you guys. I'm excited for the growth, and just his kind of zeal for stuff and his particular, stuff when it comes to the Word. And I'll tell you, everyone that I trust with opinions, I value Bobby so much because Bobby is absolutely, I won't say brutally honest, but he's very direct when he speaks to me, and I love it. I really enjoy it. As a Christian, you have to be. You have to make sure that people aren't taking things out of context, and because you're kind of dabbling with the devil, because, even back in the Bible when Jesus was in the wilderness, the devil quoted scripture. I mean, but I'm just really happy about you guys. But getting Bobby, and it's cool. I like calling Dr. Bobby anyway. But anyway, so he knows the plans for the church. God does, and of course, if God wanted David to be a king, he didn't put a crown in front of him, right? He didn't sit here and say, "Hey, here's a crown, go get it." He put a giant. All right, so he had to get through the giant to get there. We can go on so many stories about this, about how the storms of life are kind of big and looming. I mean, even look at Moses when he led the Israelites to the Red Sea. The world will tell you, or some Christians will try to tell you, well, God promises never to have you any issues or problems. That's not scriptural. Because what did he do at the sea? He didn't pick up the sea and move it. He parted it, right? So, to me, God never once promised you that you wouldn't face problems, trials, storms. However, he does promise time after time that he will be with you during them. He will be with you through them. So that's the one thing that we have to remember when we look at the Word, when we look at the stories. So, in the situation also, God has a tendency of picking up a nobody, making him a somebody, in front of everybody, without asking anybody. Right? Yeah. So, the least of these, people that don't seem to matter, and it's, I say it often all the time, even in Jesus' time, the Pharisees, the most religious people of the time frame, they didn't recognize who Jesus was, but the demons did. That's kind of weird. That would send chills down your arm. Because every time you really meditate on that, and you think of how powerful, things were at the time. But yeah, so back on that, and I think you guys are kind of displayed, and when I was going over all this, at least it's what spoke to me. And, I think you guys have exhibited faith because look where you're at now. There's been a long, treacherous, journey of not knowing, of having different people up here that you don't know, like me, every Sunday, just not really having a true leader. But I think it's finally paid off. You guys have weathered the storm. You're getting somebody that's on fire, that's very knowledgeable, that's following God's call. And I hope you guys rally behind him, honestly. Bobby means the world to me, and I think he's going to be really good for you guys. And like I said, I'm excited. But that's really all I have. I just want you guys to understand that faith, it's hard facing a fear that you can visibly see in front of you. And it's hard to apply faith, which is something you can't see. So as we're moving forward, that's it. We'll go ahead and bow and pray. Dear God, thank you. Thank you for today. Thank you for the opportunity. Thank you for the chance, Lord. I pray that you would just take the words. I pray that you would help us all apply it. Lord, thank you again for the opportunity. Lord, thank you for the people in the room. Lord, I pray for any fears as we move forward into a new year. Lord, I pray that we would glorify and we would focus on you and not ourselves. Thank you for everything you've done. Keep us protected.